Thank you for those that are logging on. There's not supposed to be sound right now, so don't worry about that. You're welcome to do question and answers in the chat, but we're just giving a couple more minutes for people to log on. Then we'll have our cameras on and our sound on and be ready to go. So sorry, you guys, about the technical difficulties, but we're so excited to have those that are logging on to Zoom and to Facebook Live with us. We will be checking both sites for question and answers. So if you are here in the Zoom meeting, you'll notice a question and answer portion in the bottom of your screen, and that's where you can go ahead and put any questions that come to mind, and at the end or mixed within the presentation, we'll be answering those as we can. So just a couple more minutes and then we're going to get started. All right, so I stopped sharing the countdown, but I'm very excited to be welcoming you guys who are just now joining on. We have participants from all over the United States and lots in different parts of Texas, so welcome. Whether you're joining us via Zoom or joining us on Facebook Live, we'll be checking both for questions. You won't have to mute yourself because you are automatically muted when you start, so you have that benefit as well. Now, my name is Anastasia Taylor. I'm the Executive Director and founder of Alliance Child and Family Solutions, and we are a nonprofit mental health agency. You'll see the donate button in the Facebook portion of our webinar, or you can go to our website about it. But we like to put these webinars on and these workshops just so that we can reach out to the community on what you guys are needing most. So the majority of the presentation tonight will be from Mike and Amy. Just to give you guys a little bit of a background about them, they are our graduate practicum students with ACFS. Amy is a counseling graduate student on the child track at the University of North Texas and is very passionate about play therapy. She received her Bachelor of Arts in Child Development in 2016 from Texas Christian University in Fort Worth, Texas. And she is a trust-based relational intervention or TBRI practitioner. So those of us who are joining from foster adoption groups hopefully know TBRI well. And then we have Mike, who's also a graduate student in the counseling program at the University of North Texas, specializing in play therapy with children and believing in the power of play throughout their lives. He received his bachelor's in science in psychology from Tarleton State University and works from an existential humanistic approach, emphasizing age-appropriate exploration and awareness of personal struggles. So that is just a little bit about them. Now, as they get ready and they start sharing their screen with our presentation for tonight, I'm going to tell you a little bit about why this topic is so important. I appreciate those who included questions when they were registering online. And so hopefully we'll get to all the questions tonight and keep it within the time. But as a full-time working parent from home who's had 2 kids at home since the pandemic started, I understand. It can be really hard when you are with your kids 24/7 to know how to have that special playtime and what the purpose of it is when we're all feeling stressed. So I hope this will give some great ideas of how to go about connecting with your kiddos in a new and special way. And we look forward to presenting that to you. So I'm going to turn it over to Amy for the start of our presentation. And she's unmuting.
There we go. It took me a minute. Okay, so let's start from the beginning. Thank you guys for being here. Really excited to present on Special Playtime. So Special Playtime is something that I assign to my parent clients sometimes to work with their kids. And well, what does that mean? You're going to learn today. So you don't necessarily have to be going to therapy to do Special Playtime with your kids. And we're going to teach you a little bit about it today. And again, Stas just did our introduction, so I'm not going to repeat our names. You guys now know who we are. So let's get started. So the learning objectives for today. It's designed to help you identify the goals of special playtime, to figure out what it is, and recognize the benefits of special playtime. How is it helping? What's the point of it? Why should I do it? Create different ways to connect with your child one-on-one. So special playtime is meant for parent, caregiver, and the child. So it's just one-on-one. If you have multiple children, make sure to make separate special playtimes. Okay, so going into what is special playtime. So most of this is based off of Landreth, Gary Landreth. He is kind of like the father of play therapy over at University of North Texas. This is based off of his book. So special playtime is a time to play with your child. It puts the focus of your attention wholly upon them while giving them freedom to direct the content of the play. So they have all of your attention. There's no phones involved. It's totally on them, and they get to choose what you guys are doing. The special playtime promotes the parent-child relationship while granting your child a sense of control within limits, which is something children rarely get to experience in their everyday lives. They're told this and that, especially with trying to figure out school at home. There's a lot more demands on parents and telling their children what to do. Also, through playtime, your child will be able to process emotions and worries with you through play, which is their natural language, and even give you some insight into how they see the world, how they experience things. Some benefits of special playtime. So the child can feel valued. They improve the parent-child relationship, and the child can increase self-awareness, and the child can increase self-efficacy and decrease parenting stress. So some of these benefits are over time, right? They're not after 1 or 2 sessions of special playtime with your kid. It's definitely not something you're going to notice immediately, but over a period of time. I've noticed with parents that I've assigned special playtime, the child starts to notice the difference. Like, hey, either mom or dad, whoever, or grandma, whoever's in charge of kind of doing most of the caregiving, they're like, hey, this parent is, or caregiver is noticing more. And they're really paying attention to me. So that's where the feeling valued comes in. And improving that parent-child relationship, child is no longer wondering or pestering when do they get that full one-on-one attention. They know that whenever you guys schedule special playtime, that's when I get full attention. So really being able to connect with them more and feeling closer to the parent, or vice versa, the parent feeling closer to the child. The child increasing self-awareness. So to elaborate on that further, when you're sitting there with your child, you're able to, let's say they just picked up a toy and they were confused by it. They thought it was going to do one thing and it ended up falling apart or something like that. They may not be aware of their facial reaction. So you being able to reflect, oh, you were surprised by that, or, you expected that toy to do such and such thing. They then get the language and awareness of what happened to their face and what emotion they were just feeling, even if they hadn't had the words to do it yet. And then child can increase self-efficacy. So sometimes in special playtime, they may want to do something a certain way. And as a parent, the caregiver, you're going to try to either do it your way or just want to help them immediately. If they're struggling with opening a package or stacking a block a certain way, you may have this instinct to try to fix it for them. I encourage you to let them get frustrated a little bit, because you might realize that they can actually do it on their own. We just may not be giving them patience to do so. Because there are several times in the playroom where I've noticed, I'm watching this kid struggle with this toy. Should I start to help them? No, I'm going to let them struggle with it for a little bit. And if they ask me then, like, hey, can you help me with this? Seems like you want my help. And me knowing my relationship with them, I have to tell, are they asking just to ask me, or they really need help with this? So that enables that self-efficacy that I mentioned. And then decrease parenting stress. That is because you can feel more attuned to your child, and you don't have anything to worry about during this time. It is solely to be present. Your phone is away, no other distractions. This is your special playtime with your child. That is all you have to focus on, is being there and focusing on what they're doing, what they're playing with. And that's it. So that's how it helps you focus on just one thing instead of the 5 million things that a parent worries about in every given moment. All right, so the parent's role during special playtime. So as I kind of mentioned, putting away electronics is huge. We all like to have our phones right on us, but they cause a lot of distractions, whether it's vibrating or making noise or something. The kids will notice it, and it might disturb their play. So seeing if there's a way that you can put the phone down, put it somewhere for 15, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and avoid any distractions. If you have other children in the house, making sure they're entertained with something else. or if you have another caregiver in the home, being able to have them take over for 30 minutes with the other children. So remaining calm and present, making sure that you've had a snack. This goes for both of you guys. Like, parents count in this too, making sure you've had a snack, you've had water, you've been able to rest at least a little bit. Because if you're going in cranky, either from hunger or just being tired, you're not going to be the best at being present. So you want to make sure that you're good to go on your green engine, is what I like to say. So reflect your child's emotions. So some of the examples that I gave earlier, the child is building a tower and it collapses. Instead of saying, oh man, or I don't know, because I'm trained to say these things. I sometimes forget the immediate reactions of like, oh man, you made a mess, something like that. Well, okay, let's focus on the emotions with what's happened. You're frustrated that tower just fell down. You worked really hard on it. Reflecting your child's actions. So as you're just kind of watching your child play and they're either quiet or they're focused on something, instead of just sitting there and staring off at a wall like, I wonder what I should do now, just focus on what the child is doing. You're sticking those magnets together, or you're putting, let's say you're coloring, you're putting all the pink in that one corner, or you're using a lot of reds, or you're pushing that pen really hard, things like that, to show that you're paying attention and the child really listens to what you're saying, even if they may not be fully registering it. They know that you're paying attention to them. So following the child's lead. So we'll talk a little bit about, in like my next bullet point, like setting limits only when necessary. So as a parent, you're still in control of this special playtime. You're deciding when it's happening. You're deciding in what room it's happening, if that's for safety reasons or whatever. But within that space that you create, the child is the leader, okay? So it's not you deciding everything about it. This is where the child gets their freedom. Setting limits only when necessary, okay? So we will talk about this in a further slide about what I mean by that. But briefly, it's a few limits, obviously for safety reasons during special playtime. And returning responsibility to your child. So what I talked about previously about that self-efficacy, if they ask you to help with something and it may be a pattern that your child has to ask for help even when they can do it by themselves, reflect. That looks like something you could do. That looks like something that you could try by yourself. And if you're still struggling with it, I can help. Something like that. Okay, so now we got to the point, what should the child do during special playtime? It's really a trick. There's no should. It is their open space. So they get to lead in whichever way they choose within the parent selected room or activity. So again, parent is in charge of that, but beyond that, child gets to choose. So the only time a parent should stop the child's play will be explained with the examples of setting limits on the next slide. I'm going to take a quick swig of water because my throat was already getting dry. I normally don't talk this much. All right, so we finally got to limit setting, then it kept referencing. So only set a limit during special playtime if it's necessary. Some examples are safety. So your child's at risk of hurting themselves or someone else. Let's say you have a couch in the room that you're in. The child starts to climb it and wants to jump off of it. Okay, you can set a limit there. You don't have to allow your child to do that unless you're okay with that. Or if you have scissors in the room because you're doing a craft and the child starts, they're about to cut their hair or they're about to attempt to cut their finger, obviously set a limit. Protecting the objects. So whatever room you're in, even if it's their toy room, they have some toy that you don't want to break. Being able to say, that's about to get damaged. And so you're going to set a limit. Anytime that it's protecting any sort of object, whether it's a toy or just something that you guys have in your home, that is an example of when you can set a limit. So time. Time ends for special playtime. Kids tend to not want to have special playtime end, but that is a limit. You know, it seems like you really want to stay in here longer, but our time is up for the day. And inappropriate behavior. So the child is performing action that is not appropriate, like taking off their clothes or touching things inappropriately. That's really up to the caregiver's perspective. And if you think taking off your clothes is just because they're hot, obviously you don't have to stop things like that. But you guys know what I mean in terms of when it's appropriate and when it's not appropriate to take off clothes and inappropriate ways of touching toys. Okay, so how to set a limit. So in all the examples I gave previously, when you're setting those limits for safety and things like that, making sure that you're using the ACT model, okay? So we're gonna be acknowledging the feeling, we're gonna be communicating the limit, and you're gonna be targeting the alternative. So it's not just saying, no, stop, don't do that. Well, why? Kid wants to know why, always, right? So acknowledge the feeling. You're frustrated. Maybe they want to throw the toy and you're going to set a limit to protect that object, okay? So you're frustrated, but the toy is not for throwing. You can punch this pillow. So you are frustrated is acknowledging the feeling. The toy is not for throwing is communicating the limit. Why am I not allowed to do this? And here's the alternative. You can punch this pillow. And the alternative is really important because it teaches your child what they are allowed to do instead. Because let's say if you just said you're frustrated but the toy is not for throwing, well, how can they express their frustration in a healthy way within those parameters of that room? You're teaching them by saying you can punch this pillow. And you may not have a pillow in the room, but finding out something that they could do to express that frustration. Another example is you like jumping, but I'm not for jumping on. You can jump on the ground, or you can jump on, let's say you have one of those mini trampolines. Just getting creative with what you want to allow them to do. And a good idea is to go and wherever your house you think that you might be able to have special playtime and scan the room. Scan the room for what you think might get broken, what you think you want to set limits on, and scan the room for things that you could use when the child is feeling angry or frustrated. Or for example, when they want to jump, what would you allow them to jump on in that room? And if there's a lot of breakable objects in that room, maybe think about considering a different room or removing those objects out before you start special playtime in that room. Just because if you're going through a 30-minute special playtime and your child just keeps wanting to grab those things and you're constantly setting limits, it's not really what you wanted to set out to do. Okay, so ideas for special play. Now that I just talked all about that, here's kind of the fun part of whether it's in a room or in your living room, whatever you guys want to do, or outside in your backyard. Some fun things you could do are building a fort together with pre-selected materials, whether that's a bunch of pillows, blankets, blocks, get creative. Making a sundae. I'm going to give you a detailed example of that in a little bit. Creating a painting or drawing together, and it could be together or the child could choose to do it by themselves. And you're watching and reflecting that. Building something with blocks of Legos, playing dress up, playing with foam swords or Nerf guns. I've had a lot of Nerf gun wars in my day. Writing a story together, and that can be with drawing pictures or just literally writing a story. And really, this is up to you. You and your child know each other best. Try to figure out something that you guys can do together. If your child loves to play with bugs and you just can't stand bugs, maybe not a good idea for special playtime. Because remember, you want to stay calm and present. So if it's an activity that's going to prevent you from doing that, try to find something that you both can agree on, basically, or just not dislike as much and prevent you from being able to be present. Okay, so detailed example of making a sundae. So remember, parent is in charge of creating that environment, okay? So the parent is laying out all the materials for the sundae in the quantities that they would accept the child using. So instead of taking out the full chocolate sauce bottle and having to set a limit, you can avoid an argument and making sure that you're staying present during special playtime, because we never want to have arguments during special playtime, is to grab a small bowl, grab a cup, however you want to do it, put the chocolate sauce that you're okay with them using, even if they used it all, put it in that container so that if they just want to dump it in, you're okay with that and you don't have to set a limit or anything like that. And so kind of that's like the beginning of the materials, right? So you're setting up the space and making sure that you're letting the child know, hey, this is not normal life anymore. We're not just gonna go run away, or I'm not going to be doing some other things, or I won't have my phone on me. This is our special playtime. And you can choose however much of these ingredients you want to put on your sundae. So you've laid out the ice cream, you've laid out the if you want them to even choose their type of bowl or type of spoon, they could, or if they wanted to eat it with a fork, are you okay with that? Like giving them opportunities to choose things, because they then feel more powerful and just feeling more in control. And kids love any opportunity they can to give them control. And as a parent or caregiver, if you're okay with letting them feel powerful when choosing silverware bowls and types of ice cream, then I'm all for it. And it makes it more fun too. So then reflecting the child's emotion on what you're doing while they're creating the sundae, or while you guys are both creating your sundaes. Let's say you guys are creating your sundae side by side, well, I'm choosing to put strawberry sauce on mine instead of chocolate sauce, because I choose to have mine look all red when I mix it together, and then if they are really excited about even building their own sundae, because what kid wouldn't be, reflecting that, like, you're so excited that you get to build your own sundae today. Or if they decided they want all the chocolate sauce that you put in that bowl, you're putting all the chocolate sauce on your sundae, or you're only putting it on one side of your sundae. So focusing on those details and making them really understand that you're paying full attention to them during this time, and reflecting those emotions, and just having fun together. Okay. Now I'm going to hand it over to Mike, and he's going to go into the rest of our PowerPoint.
Now, Mike, before you get started, one quick question. Do you always call it special playtime as you're beginning this play, or is there another name? Do you give it a name at all? Like, do you say, make it a big deal of, hey, we're going to do special playtime?
Hey, yeah, I think I would call it special playtime, because what you're really doing is carving out a space that's unique to you and the kiddo. So you're really putting this space that they know is different. That they know this is where I get to have a sense of control, and mom or dad or guardian are going to pay all this attention to me once they get used to that space. And I think creating something a little indicative of that is probably a really good idea. I know as play therapists, we refer to the play as its own special place. And we do treat it as something that's unique to just jumping out into the backyard and playing ball or something, although that can be special playtime as well. So it's a bit of a spider arachnid sort of thing. As for our next slide, challenges that you guys may face with kids, especially since special playtime is going to be a little different. And right off the bat, a lot of kids get really hesitant when they enter into a special playtime space and you're giving them all these options. And they're like, oh, hey, this isn't how life usually is. Usually it's, do I want vanilla ice cream or chocolate ice cream? There's not a lot of choices. And so especially kids that aren't used to having a lot of control in their lives, or maybe come from a cultural environment where there isn't a lot of playfulness or a lot of choice on the kid's part, they're gonna have, especially for the first few times, be a little hesitant. And the biggest thing for that is to be patient, encouraging, remind them this is space for you, and we can do whatever you want to do. And really taking that space to let them get into it at their own pace. And with time, they should get comfortable. And a lot of kids by, session 2 or 3, when they're hesitant play therapy, they're in there, they know what they want to do. They have their toys that they really like to play with, and they've got it figured out. So that's something that will happen naturally, but it is something you can encourage by being patient with them. If your child just doesn't want to play with you or is irritable during special playtime, starting off, if it's just one time, it may be reflecting, hey, you're really, irritable today, or you're not happy today. And if you have a playtime that lasts for 30 minutes or so, and you spend 10 minutes just sitting with the kid going, you're upset, and they process that and they get to playing, that's great. After that period, you may want to try another day. It may just be a bad day. Kid might be really tired. You might be really tired. Heaven knows we're all busy fellows today. It could just be a bad day. There could have been any number of things that have happened. And it's okay to say, why don't we do this tomorrow or next Friday or this weekend instead? And if you're stressed or not interested in the play, if you find yourself really getting caught up in what's going on, especially if you're used to keeping things very organized, kids are messy by nature. I've never met a very young child who didn't make a mess of things. Sometimes it's going to be really keeping a track of your own stress level and finding activities that are going to be okay with your level of stress, because ultimately this is about bonding with your kid. So if you're stressed out of your gourd because there's stuff everywhere, you're not going to be focused on your kid. You're not going to be forming that relationship and really being with them. You're going to be up in your head about how much of a mess this is going to be to clean up. So part of that is where you can set limits, like, hey, we're going to do this thing, but we need to be careful, or we need to be clean. Or ultimately about planning ahead and picking up the things that aren't going to stress you as much, that aren't going to hit on your triggers, and they're going to be something you can share in a very special way with your kid, rather than being up in your own head. If I can have the next slide, please. Haha. And these are some cultural considerations here regarding play in general. We mentioned Gary Landreth before. He is one of the big names in play therapy, and his general statement on play therapy across cultures is that it's effective, and the core concepts that you're attuned with your child and you're responding to their emotions are in many ways universal human elements. That these things ideally transcend cultural differences between different ethnic and cultural background groups, and really kind of hit to the essence, the humanity of a child. A lot of play therapists who work with many different cultural backgrounds suggest having dolls and figures that can represent different ethnicities and colors and art sets and graphs, craftos, and media, even if that can represent people from different ethnic backgrounds. More and more, we're multi-ethnic in our society, and especially with public schooling, your kid is going to be exposed to a lot of different things. So either they're going to be having questions about their own culture, or they're going to be having questions about someone else's. And so it's good to have these tools for kids to explore those things. And doubly, especially for kids who come from what we call the non-dominant cultural backgrounds in any particular region, to see representations of themselves, because generally a lot of the media is going to skew towards whatever is the most populous or most historically prevalent culture for that region. Another thing to be aware of is differences in cultural styles. And this is especially true if you come from a blended family. So if mom and dad are from two different cultures or two different ethnic backgrounds, or you have members of the family who are in the home who are from different backgrounds, or children are adopted and their background of origin isn't the same as their new guardians' backgrounds. It's a really good idea to try and figure out what the cultural norms are kind of across those boards and get an idea of what the child has learned so far. Because that learning will help you attune to them and understand their perspective and what kind of difficulties you may have. So if a child has one particular cultural lesson from one side of the family, let's say dad's side, and mom's side is very different, that may be conflicting in the child. Or maybe you just need to be aware that there's some confusion there. And that will help you kind of understand both their behavior and kind of where they're coming from. And also kind of help you either figure out a challenge as it's happening or kind of cut a challenge off at the pass. And now to kind of discuss from an equally important but kind of different end, for kids with significant mental health or developmental differences, special playtime can take some extra considerations. And we have research and books and data showing that special playtime is just as useful, sometimes even more useful, for kids who are going through serious mental health concerns or who have significant developmental delays or other concerns. Just be aware that, again, you need to plan ahead for those challenges. So if you have a kid who you know has, let's take severe anxiety as a base example, expect that they will be hesitant. This is going to be a brand new situation for them probably, and anxious children tend to be very cautious. So being very encouraging, being very clear about everything that's going on will help them feel more comfortable and get adjusted into the space. As far as specific research, it's a culture I'm not familiar with the pronunciation, but Amrulahifar and his research group found teaching mothers specifically play therapy techniques to use with autistic children helped in a lot of different areas, but especially with familial bonds and socializing skills. It was actually a very interesting study that was done through many different family groups. What they found pretty significant advantages from there. Baggerly discussed the use of group play to help children cope with a variety of concerns related to homelessness, especially as the economy is becoming more difficult, issues regarding bleed off from financial stress, which is often something that happens in a lot of families, or loss of resources, or just loss of the ability to go out into the world can be big concerns. And then play can even be helpful with children going through major diseases or other physical or emotional ailments. The play, if nothing else, can help them get their minds off of it for a while. And over a long course of time can actually build resilient skills and the self-efficacy that Amy mentioned, which is useful to every kid, but especially a kid facing such a strong struggle so early in their lives. The big takeaways we kind of like you guys to take and grab from this is that kids rarely get to be in control of anything, which is rightly so. A government run by children would collapse. But kids crave control, and they have to learn how to do it. So this is a way for them to gradually increase that efficacy, get a chance to play with control, get a chance to feel that, and like putty in their hands, start to really get a feel for what that's like. And that's going to help them grow. And as time goes on, they'll get better and better at it. And that's one of the major goals that you can get from this. And ultimately, that will help them kind of grow up. It'll help them be more responsible children and hopefully more attentive and attuned and responsible adults later on in life. Special playtime, you should do your absolute best to keep in uninterrupted space. So you want it to be, we're going to play for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever schedule you can put together in a way that you've determined, that after that the kid gets to take from there. So we're going to play with blocks, and you've both determined that's good, and then the kid can take it from there. But do your best to stick to that time frame. So try not to go too far over or too far under, and make sure that you are uninterrupted, pardon me, and that you aren't mentally off in space, that you are very much attuned in that space. And as far as special playtime, possibilities are endless. You can do literally anything can be play, especially with a kid, because kids are super creative. Cooking can be played, baking, arts and crafts, building things, made-up games, Nerf gun fights, dancing, all sorts of things. One special thing we'll talk in here is that a lot of play therapists suggest not using electronic media. So even though it may be super fun and maybe a great bonding experience to play Mario Kart with your kids, try not to make that your special playtime, because there's not a lot of space for the kid to gain control there, and not a lot of space for them to explore in that space. It's a very rigid and defined area based on the game. Some games are slightly exceptional to that, but generally speaking, you want to keep it more analog than digital. And remember at all times that this is a time for you to relax and connect with your kid. That, well, this is space for them and playtime that they're in control of. You should be having fun, because if you're not, your kid will know. The kids are very perceptive. And if you're not having a good time and you're not there, they're going to feel it. And a big part of this is sharing that moment and building that relationship with your kid. And kind of rounding us off today with some commonly frequent asked questions. My child's a child, and why should I let them be in charge? You're really not. You're giving them some power, but you're keeping the ultimate control. You're setting the agenda. You're working with them and setting the time. You have the power to set limits. The kid is getting a sense of control. They're getting the freedom to do things that they normally wouldn't. But ultimately, you're still in charge. How long does special playtime last? And as we discussed, that's up to you. 30 minutes is kind of a good baseline. Sometimes you want to go longer, sometimes you want to go shorter. The busier you are in your schedule, you may only have 15 minutes or 20 minutes on a particular day that will work. And that can be used to great effect. It's just a matter of building that intention, getting in there, having that special playtime, and being focused entirely on your kid in that space. And as we discussed, an uninterested looking child, there's lots of reasons. But typically the one we find as play therapists is the situation is new and different and scary. Decision making in general is confusing for humans as a whole, and doubly so when you've only had 5 years of experience doing it. And for a lot of kids, it's very stressful. But generally they warm up once they have an understanding, and once they understand that there's no goal. A lot of times kids are used to looking for goals. What is mom or dad or teacher doing this for? And once they realize there's no strings attached, all of a sudden we can have fun with that. So a little bit of patience, a little bit of encouragement, and they should warm right up. That's just a list of our references there. Here's our emails. Both of these are through our university. And you can feel free to shoot questions to us there. And this is a really cool website that Amy found a while back. that has resources and sort of a different approach and more details in a website form about special playtime and how to do it with kids by somebody who's been doing it for quite a while. And that's that. So I suppose we can transition to fielding some of those questions we picked up.
Yeah. So one of the questions was, and I'm so sorry, I was going to put my own little question thing on. One of the questions that we got was, you guys mentioned a lot about what it looked like to have special playtime with younger kids. So what does that look like for maybe preteens that may be a little bit more moody attitudey, as we call it in our house, or less interested in something being called special playtime? How do you get them involved in that?
Yeah, that's an interesting cup of tea with that. So a lot of the things still apply, although you're going to take a very different approach. And in therapy world, we tend to refer to play therapy with teenagers as activity therapy. And it takes a slightly different look. And a lot of what you're going to do is really try and find consensus with your child. So I'm thinking of a child who's 12, 13, 14, they've learned about emotions, they've been around the world for more than a decade. And a lot of the things that really focus on in special playtime may not be as important to them at that time. So really it's finding activities that they agree with, that they think are going to be fun to do with you, and also giving them those sorts of feedback. So maybe you aren't being as attentive to their emotion verbally. So maybe instead of saying as much about their emotional state as far as observing and saying, you look frustrated, you look this, you look that, you save those for really prevalent emotions. And maybe you try for a little more bonding time and just talking space, because they've already had a chance to explore those emotions, which, unless they haven't. Some kids, by the time they reach their teens, they have a really hard time with emotions, and that could be for all sorts of reasons. So ultimately, I think the biggest difference is going to be how you approach it in your response. Not that you aren't giving them your whole attention, but that you are looking for a more relational element rather than a pre-planned freedom element, so to speak. Anything you'd like to add with that, Amy?
It always takes you a minute to find the unmute button. I would say just some concrete examples. I mean, it depends on what your child likes, right? But some very basic examples that we've used with preteens, baking, or any sort of small wood craft making. Whether you guys have a way that you can do wood burning together, or you can start nailing some things together. Again, safety parameters. Do you trust your teenager to do those things? Making sure that you're okay with that. And if you're so concerned about safety where you're not present anymore, then find another activity. If you want to do, if they're really into sports, don't play a basketball game, but use the basketball to create a new game that you can both be present for. Because if it turns into a competition, you just want to make sure that it's still a place where you guys can be calm and present together.
Great advice. So another question that we got on the Facebook Live was, can you use special playtime for helping work through things like school or social anxiety? Is there a limit on how long is too long for special playtime? Like, is there a cap where it stops being effective?
That's a great question. To the first half of it, I would probably say that, in my opinion, you should try to keep special playtime about the playtime, and that a lot of those problems will be assisted through the process. So speaking specifically to social anxiety, a kid with social anxiety oftentimes is not used to having control. In a social situation is all about control when you really think about it. Controlling what you say, what you think, trying to navigate your boat through this significant social issue, whether it be a conversation between peers or talking to a teacher or someone else in the family. And so getting them more familiar with that in general will be helpful. And it is something you can do as you're deepening that bond between you to discuss at another time or perhaps afterwards, though you want to be careful not to conflate the two too much. Because special playtime should be fun and relaxing and bonding space. It shouldn't have strings attached. So I would say it's an excellent assistant with that, and that on perhaps another day, you might sit down and say, hey, maybe we can work on trying to talk in public. That's a great example. Or if your child struggles with specific problems, maybe having a discussion like, hey, can we talk about that? What's the struggle there? And from their work on those, so they can work side by side in tandem. The second part of that, as far as length, I personally don't think there's any prescribed too much playtime. I am of the general belief that everybody would be perfectly happy and healthy in life if they could play 24/7, but we do have to sleep, eat, and do other things in our lives, so that gets in the way. I think it's as much as you and your kid can be happy and engaged together with. And so if that looks like 20 minutes once a week because life is busy and that's all you can find to give wholly to your child, then do that. If that looks like an hour a day and both of you are having a great time and both of you are really engaged and with it, then that's great too.
Now, you mentioned as long as it's still happy for you and your kids, and I'll bump it over to Amy to make her get challenged too. But what happens if you're in the middle of special playtime and your kiddo has a meltdown, or they're throwing things, or they're acting out and just not having fun anymore?
Reflect it, because something triggered that. Something in their play, something they saw, something they heard. See if you can figure it out. If you don't know, just say, hey, you're really frustrated right now. And remember to go back to the limit setting. So if they are throwing toys, be able to do the ACT model. So you're really frustrated right now. The toy is not for throwing. You can go punch this pillow. You can go tear up some old newspaper. Making sure that you're providing an alternative and still focusing on that emotion. Because you want to review that. If they're not able to go do that alternative, we did not talk about this, but in the play therapy room, we set the ultimate limit. So if they are not able to follow those rules, and if they're not able to be engaged anymore, or they just can't get a hold of their anger, even with you reflecting that, and you making sure you're remaining calm and not yelling at them. If that can't happen, then you'll be able to say, since you chose to continue to throw objects, we're going to have to end special playtime for today.
Good. So you mentioned throwing objects and you mentioned setting those limits. And it sounds like, if I'm hearing you correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, that when you're going into it, maybe you are giving a certain amount of time, like, hey, this is our 30 minutes together where you get 100% of my attention. It's just for me and you, not for sister, not for brother, but it's just our time together. Now, so first question, is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. So you and child are creating this time where you've set aside this time to let them know in the beginning, like, we have 30 minutes for special playtime today. Hey, we have 20 minutes for special playtime today.
Perfect. So we have the amount of time. You gave some great suggestions of activities. Now, one of the other questions, again, just to kind of bring it back in, is What happens if it's the ultimate preteen of they stomp off, I don't want to spend time with you, this is dumb, and they're just not happy. So that's their temper tantrum, which I think all of us parents of teens are very aware about. How do we still make that a special playtime if they're leaving the room?
So with that specific example, you know your kid best. If they are stomping away because they are truly disinterested, or they actually want to be with you, they just think it's lame or it's weird to do special playtime when they're a teenager. And if you want to create a new name together with a teenager, you can. But making sure that it's focused on that one-on-one time, and it's a key word for both of you guys. But if they're really not interested, tell them like, hey, I'm going to follow you. And it seems like you're really not interested in this right now, but I'm just going to sit with you for 5-10 minutes. And if you want to talk to me or do something while I'm here, great. If not, I'm going to go ahead and walk out after 5-10 minutes. So it's really for them making sure that you're not ending it just because they're in a bad mood. Because they might just be putting up a front, but that may really not be a bad mood, but they're testing you in that. So making sure that you are still able to try to connect to them. And even if they are saying that they're not into it, they might still be. So making sure that you can try to connect with them in that.
And I'll also just jump in to add that onboarding is such a huge thing with teenagers. So really giving them the benefit of that freedom they've learned when they were younger, hopefully, and bring them in on the decision-making process of what you're doing will help head off some of those, this is dumb, I don't want to do this anymore. Because they've agreed to it. This is something they think they'd have fun with. Sometimes that changes day of. But it will really help reduce the instances that you'll run into that.
Now, I know you guys mentioned that special playtime is one-on-one with each kid if you have multiple kiddos. So what happens if you're the only parent at home and you have young kiddos? How do you even make that work? Go for it.
Mute button. So for my 2 cents, I have 2 perspectives on that. The first one is, depending on the ages of your kids and their level of independence, that may not be a problem. Some kids, by the time they're 4, they can sit in a room by themselves for half an hour and be perfectly entertained with Legos or cartoons or any number of things. And that can be a good way. I know it's really hard to find childcare right now because of the pandemic. So that often is off the table for many people. So if you have kids that you think are capable of entertaining themselves and being unattended, loosely, we'll put here, for that 20-30 minute space, that is ideal. However, it is not unreasonable to consider bringing multiple kids into it. And we don't suggest doing it right off. We really want you to get a feel for it one-on-one with a kid. But sometimes life doesn't play nice or by our rules. So if you have 2 kids and you just can't find a way for both of them to be entertained while you have special playtime with one, then making a Sunday with 2 and just doing your best to put your attention onto both of them is viable. Not ideal. And as we often say, we teach ideal, but we practice viable or practice realistic. So ideally, you'd want some way to entertain your child or some additional care. Otherwise, maybe try and stretch it to both and just really try and keep your focus between preferably no more than 2 or 3. Trained professionals can push themselves a little further, but.
Now you mentioned some of the different activities, and I'll toss this over to Amy. What happens if your kids are just 2 different ages, completely different interests? How do you set up for a special playtime with such diverse interests and ages?
Okay, so for this question, we're assuming that one cannot play by themselves. No? Okay. Well, if you have to do both at the same time, taking turns then, making sure that those children are aware that, hey, we can't do this just one-on-one. We have to do it with both of you guys. So we're going to have to take turns with who gets to choose the activity and what we're doing. Because it's got to be fair, right? You can't choose the same activity that one child wants 3 special playtimes in a row and the other child doesn't get anything. That would prevent them from being present and attuned. So that's the situation if they have to both be present. And if they can be on their own and you can just do it one-on-one, it's totally okay and appropriate that your children have different interests. Just making sure that you're able to find what that interest is. And again, like I said earlier, making sure that you're able to stay present. So if one child is really into bugs and one is really into, I don't know, building things with Legos, and you're okay with the bugs, but building Legos bores you and you can't stay present, find another activity that you can still be present for with that kid.
Perfect. And so one other question. So if you have the 2 kiddos that are in the session together and maybe they don't get along, because we know siblings fight, how do you handle that?
So we're edging into more complex territory with this. So trying to keep it within the more accessible route. The best thing, if you are in that situation where you can't have them individually, is to set limits. And in these cases, you'd want to set limits with both of them. And it could be something to the effect, following the ACT model. I know you're both frustrated, but this isn't a place for fighting. We can focus on what we're doing and talk about this later. Or if it continues, hey, I know you're both angry, but this is special playtime. It's not for fighting. If we can't agree to focus on what we're going to do and stop fighting, then we'll have to stop playing for now and come back to this when we're all a little clear-headed.
Perfect. So last question for the evening, and I'm going to bump it to both of you. So you get to weigh in. One of the biggest questions we got is, yes, we understand there needs to be that one-on-one time with kids, that we need to try and have it with each of them. Again, teaching to the best case scenario whenever possible. What about with this pandemic and working from home, while we want to have that special playtime, do you have any suggestions for what parents are supposed to do, or what we as parents are supposed to do with those little ones that constantly want to ask questions and be by our side? How do we encourage them to play independently as well?
So I'll go ahead and jump on that one first. One of my biggest, I won't call this professional suggestion as much as it's like a general philosophy in play for young folks, is if you want a kid to be independent, you should probably provide them with as much avenue as you can as far as different activities. So I'll give a great example. I have a young nephew who is a cut off of my block. He loves his video games. He's a big video game kid. We can always bond over that. However, he needs to have blocks and puzzles and writing materials and all sorts of other things so that he has different avenues so he doesn't get bored, so he does get the chance to do other things. And a lot of times when kids are looking for your attention, one is because kids really need parental attention, and sometimes it's really hard to give. So that's something Special Playtime helps with. That becomes a carrot of sorts. Hey, honey, you know, we can't, daddy has to work, mommy has to work, you know, we can play together during special playtime tonight. And the other thing is just to provide a variety of different things and to encourage hobbies. I think hobbies are really underrated by a lot of people, especially once a kid gets up to 5, 6. They usually have some distinct interests, and you know those interests may be dinosaurs and spaceships. But getting something that really enthralls them, that catches their creativity and their interests, and really fostering that can give them something to really focus on. So I would definitely suggest if they have an interest, really lay into that, really support them in that, and encourage them to explore that and give them the means to do so.
Okay, so my comment will be a little bit different than Mike's. So I'm going to focus on structure of your day. So if you're working from home and your kids are continually bothering you, like play with me, whatever, or when can you play with me? Or I need help with this. Making sure that you can go over your day and kind of look at when you take your breaks, when you have lunch, what time you're usually done for the day. And depending on your child's age, tell them what your schedule is, and let them know you might have some wrenches thrown in your schedule. Sometimes I might have some surprise meetings that I don't know about. And if there's a way that you can each create your own schedule, like the child's schedule and your schedule, and if you can use pictures if they can't read yet, just being able to talk about your daily schedule, and this is when mom is available, or this is when dad is available, or this is when whoever caregiver is available. And being okay with the beginning of, we are in the pandemic, this is the first time we've done this. It takes a lot of time to get used to a new thing like this, especially for children who have no idea really what's happening, right? We're just telling them it's coronavirus, and they can say coronavirus probably, but they still don't know all what that entails. So having a little bit of patience for yourself, for your kids. So when they come into your office space or your makeshift bedroom office, to say, mommy, I need help with this, daddy, I need help with this, say, you can take a deep breath, say, I'm going to repeat this 5 more times today, but I can't do this right now, but I will be available in such and such time period. Or again, like what Mike said, of I can't play with you right now, but I will be able to play with you at special time tonight. Making that child is really checking in on you on when can you pay full attention to me again, because I love that. So honoring that, I know you want to spend time with me right now, but I need to finish this, and at such and such time I could pay attention to you again.
I think those are great suggestions, you guys. So I know we're wrapping up for the night. Obviously, you see on our question and answer page here that we hope you'll follow us on social media. It's the @ACFS Texas, which stands for Alliance Child Family Solutions, and then Texas spelled out. If you have additional questions that we didn't answer, we will be posting both on Facebook in the comments, as well as to those who registered for the event, the link once it's uploaded to YouTube, as well as a survey for you to complete, and information so that you can get back in contact with Mike and Amy for any additional questions. Now, if you're struggling, if you're feeling stressed, please note that here at Alliance Child and Family Solutions, we care, and you can go online to our website to fill out new client forms and get scheduled for counseling. So again, thank you for joining us tonight. Send us suggestions of what else you want to hear. And we hope that you enjoy special playtime, whether it's with your toddler, your elementary age, junior high, or those teenagers. Make it your own time, and let us know how it goes. Thank you guys.